Welcome back to another video folks. This time we're going to be digging directly into Oblivion's files. That is to say, I will be using the Oblivion.esm file as my primary source of information. I am going to become a digital archaeologist all of my own. Other than, of course, sense checking after the fact to make sure I haven't gotten something egregiously wrong. I don't want to spread misinformation if I can avoid it. Therefore, you may hear some addendums later in the video, where I am adding some much needed context or correcting my own independent findings, but only where absolutely necessary. Anyway, why haven't I done this before? Well, I struggled with getting the construction set to work due to how my Oblivion install is, well, installed. But I figured out how to fix that and here we are, and I must say it's been a real treat to dig into the game files. I'm totally addicted now. I must caveat this by saying I am not a game developer or an expert when it comes to this, but I think what I've found is pretty interesting and open to at least some interpretation. With that in mind, I've taken a very close look at the actual backend structure that makes Oblivion's world work. Quests, topics, info records, scripts, packages, factions, references, cells, world spaces, containers, books, and all the tiny bits of data that most players never see. With a view to finding cut content, almost but not quite cut content, hidden mechanics, mysterious stuff, oddities, whatever I could turn up. I will note here that some of what I'll cover is still in the game, but could relate to cut content, or is just really weird for whatever reason. So to hammer the point home, for this investigation, the primary source is my best attempt to do a really in-depth investigation of the Oblivion ESM file. We're going to be asking a lot of questions. Does a dialogue topic have info responses? Does a quest have stages? Is a script attached to anything? Is an NPC placed in the world? Does an AI package belong to an actor? Does a rumour set a variable that later gets reset by follow-up dialogue? And many more. Those sorts of questions are essential because they separate a real bit of cut content from wishful thinking, and we want to be factual here as much as we can. So before we get into it, I want to thank the channel members and Patreon supporters for continuing to help me be able to produce these videos. Also, I'd be grateful if you'd like, subscribe, hype, all that good stuff. It helps more than you know. Anyway, with that said, let's crack on with our investigation. So, I already mentioned that some of what I'll cover exists in the shipped game, but is mysterious for some reason, and the Orum Gang is exactly that. It's in the game. But weirdly enough, it wasn't until I fired up the construction set that I realised how intricate the whole Orum Gang thing actually is. It's so elaborate and so poorly surfaced to the player that it actually feels like a reduced questline hiding in plain sight. Like, I can almost guarantee that barely anyone out there who's played Oblivion would know any of this even exists. And given how complex it is, I have a feeling this must have related to an activity for the player that was cut. So what's it all about? Let's take a look at what we can find in the game's files. The faction record is Orum Faction with the full name Shadenhall Orum's Gang. Associated NPCs include Ogash Gra Magal, Dulfish Gro Orum, Magab Gra Orum, Bazar Gro Gars, and 2 Kamonatong Courier actors. The associated spaces include Ogash Gra Magal's house, Magram Gra Orum's house and basement, and a Newlands Lodge Orum Gang table. The game even gives the player warning lines. Bazar tells the player he has protection from the Orum Gang and that they will fillet you if you mess with him. Another Shadenhall line refers to the Orums as the boss uglies and warns the player to stay outside. That would seem to be, on the face of it, decent local crime world building, but the scripts go much further. Ogash Gra Magal's script moves skooma and gold between actors and containers, literally miles and miles across the map. On the package where Ogash gets the skooma, the script checks the Imperial City waterfront drop. If the drop has no skooma, it adds 10 bottles. It then clears gold out of the drop. On completion, it calculates gold based on the skooma count, removes gold from Ogash and puts it into the waterfront drop barrel. On the delivery package, Ogash removes skooma from herself and adds it to Orum Gang Courier 1 ref, while also taking gold from that courier. Later, Ogash gives excess gold to Dulfish Gro Orum back in Shadenhall. So for those of you watching who have never opened the construction set, it is worth explaining package events, and I'm going to attempt to do so the best I can, although I am not a game developer. So here goes. An AI package tells an NPC to do something: travel to a location, eat, sleep, follow another actor, use an object, and so on. Oblivion scripts can react when a package starts, finishes, or changes. Here, those package events are being used as transaction points. Ogash starts a package, the drop barrel is stocked. She completes a package, money moves. She completes another package, skooma moves to a courier. What we are seeing here, in essence, is a scheduled logistics loop. The courier side is just as interesting. Orum Gang Courier 1 script fires on a package change called Orum Gang Courier Deliver Drugs to Kingcrest Cavern. The courier removes all skooma from his own inventory and deposits it into Orum Gang Hollow Rock Ref, but only if the rock has one or fewer skooma bottles already. Then the Hollow Rock has its own script. On load, it removes all items. The comment says that someone mysteriously takes everything from this rock when you're not around. That comment is wonderful because it gives us a clue as to what the designer was trying to solve. If the player never observes the rock, the smuggling chain should not keep accumulating evidence forever. The rock cleans itself when loaded, creating the illusion of an off-screen receiver. In other words, the game is simulating a criminal network in the background. The route can be reconstructed with the proper caveat that this is a reconstruction from script behaviour. In essence, I want to describe the whole thing in plainer language. Ogash gathers skooma from an Imperial City waterfront drop barrel. She exchanges skooma and gold with a Kimona Tong courier. The courier takes the skooma to King's Crest Cavern and places it in a hollow rock. The rock empties itself when loaded, implying an unseen collector. Ogash then channels money back to Dullfish. The system even has gang dining and meeting packages at Newlands Lodge. So we can absolutely confirm that the faction, actors, scripts, packages and containers, and inventory transfers exist. What's probable, though slightly unlikely I think, is that Bethesda intended players to be able to notice some of this through NPC routines or local dialogue. But why do I say unlikely? Well, it's so in the background hardly anybody would pick up on it, I think, and if I were to speculate, I would say that there may once have been a player-facing quest where you could expose, disrupt, or join the operation. That last part is not confirmed mainly because my investigation did not find an Orum-specific quest record, journal stages, or a clear choice dialogue chain, and believe me, I tried. The Orum Gang is therefore one of the strangest hidden systems in the game. It shows how much effort Bethesda were seemingly willing to spend on a simulation the player may never even have realised existed. I only say that because that's what's in existence. This of course begs the question I raised earlier. When does a hidden ambient system become so ridiculously elaborate that it looks like the remains of a reduced quest? Next, we're going to be taking a close look at Oblivion's goblins because they're way more interesting than you think. The clues I came across regarding the goblins in the construction set sit somewhere between actual shipped quest logic and hidden backend reduced systemic ambition. Part of the reason for this is that, as far as I can tell from Oblivion's version history, this was actually meant to be part of the shipped game but was buggy. They tried to fix it, but unfortunately it never worked properly. So it ended up not working at all in the final patch that most players are playing via Steam and GOG. So I can safely say this is currently considered cut content to all intents and purposes. Anyway, when it comes to what players actually see in the game, a remnant remains. Most Oblivion players will know the Cropsford quest, one of my favourites in actual fact, where settlers are threatened by Goblin War parties. Apart from those who have seen videos about this or read about it online, far fewer players realise that the Oblivion.esm contains a broader Goblin tribe architecture, with tribes, heads, shamans, home locations, stolen totems, and backend logic designed to stop a war from resolving out of sight. So why am I going into this here if it's been talked about before? Well, I think it's interesting to take a look at how it's all actually working in the background, and what it could have been. To understand that, we need to look closely at the Cropsford quest first and then expand out from there. The central records include Goblin Wars quest, Goblin Wars script, Goblin Head script, Goblin Tribe A through Goblin Tribe G, and MS-46. The Goblin Wars script assigns initial ownership. It sets the Cracked Wood heads home to 1, meaning the Cracked Wood Cave tribe owns it. It sets the Timberscar heads home to 2. Then it sets current locations. 1 head belongs to a tribe but is physically at a rival tribe's location. That is the premise of a Goblin War. 1 tribe has stolen another tribe's head or totem. Then the script stops the quest. That line is one of the reasons this cluster needs careful treatment. Goblin Wars quest is not behaving like a normal player quest. It looks like an initialization controller. It sets up state, then stops. The player doesn't receive a journal entry called Goblin Wars, but the backend values it establishes can still be used by other systems. Goblin Head script gives us the clearest view of the design. Each head tracks home, my location, and player has me. It also has a protective activation check. If the player is not in the same cell and the head is not in the player's possession, the script prevents activation. The comment says this is to prevent the war from ending in low. This is likely referring to low processing, the unloaded off-screen simulation state where actors can still update packages without the player's presence. At least, that is my interpretation of what low means in this context. So, from my understanding, the designers were going a bit beyond simply placing goblin props in caves and were trying to control when the war would resolve too. I wonder whether this was because of performance issues. The player had to be close enough for the relevant activation to make sense in terms of processing budget, I think. Otherwise, there maybe could have been a performance hit for something the player wasn't even a part of, and in terms of missing out on content going on, the world simulation might end a war while the player was nowhere nearby. MS-46, the Cropsford quest, integrates part of this. Its script comments say killing Shaman A is one way to win the quest, and that getting the tribal head is another. Because the goblin staff is a generic object, the script checks the specific goblin head variable instead. If goblin head crackedwood.player has me is 1 and head stolen is 0, it sets head stolen to 1. So, what is all this then? We can absolutely confirm that the ESM has real goblin tribe factions, head scripts, tribe ownership variables, and MS-46 integration. And we can infer from Oblivion's version history that the wider Goblin War simulation was reduced or simplified for the final player experience. What we can't confirm, and is pure speculation, is that there was a fully removed questline with journal stages beyond MS-46. The system is partly shipped. The proper framing is hidden backend architecture, not simply cut content. Though it effectively is, to all intents and purposes, cut content as it stands now. What I find fascinating here is how close it is to a strategy game hiding inside an RPG. Tribes have territories, totems or heads can be stolen, shamans can be killed. The player can intervene by taking the symbolic object that drives the conflict. The final game presents this through a small quest, and it's pretty tantalising to be honest. My digging around in the ESM shows the broader machinery required that was intended to make it work. It's a shame it didn't though. There are mods that you can download to get it working. Definitely worth a try. Now we come to one of the most interesting things surfaced while crawling around in the game files. Oblivion's Arena Remnants. In the finished game, as we all know, the arena is an Imperial City institution. You sign up, fight your way through the ranks, bet on matches, meet the adoring fan, and eventually challenge the Grand Champion. It's one of Oblivion's most memorable questlines, but the ESM actually still carries evidence that the arena system was once far broader, or at least that Bethesda experimented with local arena infrastructure before finalising the Imperial City version. The most direct clue is Arena Test. The script is attached to Test Arena 01, an NPC called Arena Contestant. The comment is pretty explicit. This is just a test to get the Coral Arena guys fighting. Wait, what? Coral? Why is Coral mentioned? Anyway, immediately after that, the script says the block was commented out because refs have been deleted. The deleted references were Coral Arena 01 ref and 02 ref, and the old logic would have made the two combatants start combat with each other. Pretty mysterious though, right? This is strong evidence for something being changed. A developer comment directly describes a Coral Arena fight test and tells us the references were deleted. That does not prove a full Coral Arena questline survived the late development, but it does prove a Coral Arena combat test existed and was later severed. There is also Coral Arena topic, a dial record with the full text Coral Arena. It is linked to NQD Coral metadata and has no info responses. On its own, an empty topic would be weak. Beside Arena Test and the Coral Arena cell though, it becomes much more meaningful. Then we have Arena Spectator Script. This is where the evidence expands from Coral to a far more interesting multi-city scaffold. Or to put it another way, our first indication beyond Coral being mentioned that the Arena system originally was meant to encompass all the other cities. The script declares city match variables: Coral match, Skingrad match, Shadenhall match, Imperial City match, Leowin match, Anvil match, Bruma match, and Bravo match. Digging around, I found many implementation hits for Coral match, but the other city variables appear only as declarations. In other words, the script knew about matches in every major city, but only the Coral path has meaningful implementation left as far as I could see. And that is a very important distinction. The evidence doesn't go as far as to prove that every city had a complete playable arena, but rather that the arena spectator logic once had variables for city-specific matches, and the surviving implementation is concentrated around Coral. This could mean a broader arena league was planned. It could mean the designers prototyped city matches and cut them early. It could also mean the variables were drafted speculatively and never developed. The info left in the ESM isn't enough, I think, for us to determine which of these is true, so far anyway. Because the record cluster continues, there are packages and objects that align with local arenas. Go to Coral Arena X, targets Coral Arena and Arena Combatant Marker Ref, but had no assignment that I could find. Ida of Lenormand visits Coral Arena is assigned to clearly Ida of Lenormand and targets Arena Gallery Marker Ref. There are unassigned or suspicious arena packages for City Blade Masters, beggars travelling to arena areas, guard patrols near arenas, and spectator routines. There are Anvil Bloodworks chest and Leowin Bloodworks chest, both unplaced in the files, implying Bloodworks support objects beyond the final Imperial City implementation. The cell situation is complicated, and this is where making grand claims could become tempting, so I'll have to be careful to stick to the evidence. Coral Arena exists as a cell with the full name Arena. It has many placed references: combatant markers, gallery markers, gates, doors, and arena infrastructure. But we need to remember that it appears partly reused. Its spectator and gambler doors are linked to Imperial City Arena spectator doors, so if we are being precise, we should not call the whole Coral Arena cell cut or unused. The cut evidence is different to that. The deleted Coral fight refs, the empty Coral Arena topic, the city match variables, and the leftover packages. There are also city and test arena cells: Anvil Arena Centre, Anvil Exterior Arena A, Shadenhall Exterior 10 Arena, Kvatch East Arena, Kvatch New Arena, E3 Kvatch Arena, Test Arena John Paul, and Test Arena Kurt. Some are likely prototype geometry, some are test spaces. E3 Kvatch Arena is specifically tied to demo material. Kvatch's arena pieces can be interpreted as environmental remnants around a destroyed city rather than proof of a playable arena quest in Kvatch. Again, the key is not to make claims that we can't back up. There is even a local social clue in Gattern script. The script tracks Gattern Grogonk, a resident of Coral, losing or winning gold betting at the arena. Not talking about Coral for a day, offering the player a drink and going hunting. It's a small thing, but it shows arena outcomes affecting NPC local behaviour or dialogue. That fits the broader pattern of an arena system that had civic and social effects beyond the actual fight pit. We also have Shelley Var in Shaden Hall, where the surviving replies mention betting and moral lectures, and Skingrad's Graklak Var, where a response says the speaker would not mind making bets but is unsure about presumably Graklak Grobuglump because he seems slick. Graklak obviously exists, and we can see several Graklak packages that are unassigned or XXX prefixed. There's also Bravo, where we find Ware's Var and a possible connection to Bravo's cut arena, but that I think is a bit weaker. It could also hint at missing recruitment or local membership context for what we can never know. It doesn't prove a Bravo arena connection, but it can be inferred perhaps. These other remnants, of course, are not enough to declare a cut gambling guild or arena betting quest definitively, in addition to the cut city arenas. But they are enough to notice a pattern. Oblivion had more local social betting stuff going on in the data than the final game would suggest. In the end, they are simply some interesting remnants to add to the overall picture we're forming here. The best reconstruction, and I label this clearly here as reconstruction based on available evidence, is this. Bethesda experimented with a city-aware arena framework, with Coral as the strongest surviving local test evidentially, and with some supporting evidence in the form of records for other cities. Over time, the playable system was centralised in the Imperial City. Some local arena cells, packages, variables and containers remain in the ESM. The final game gives us one grand arena, the backend contains the traces of the wider concept. Now, I am going to enter in here with an addendum from the future, because as I often do, I wanted to double check whether I had missed anything or reached wrong conclusions, especially when it comes to a topic like this that, to be honest, as a bit of a construction set novice, I found to be a bit overwhelming. I'm admittedly quite pleased with my own conclusion that came from the evidence I managed to find on my own fumbling way, as it isn't too far from the actual truth of the matter, crazily enough. So what does the wider context suggest? Well, it turns out that Emil Pagliarulo, who was in charge of writing the arena questline, made the decision to allow a majority of the arena content to be cut, mainly to save space on the game disc, and mainly by cutting voice lines, of which there was apparently 800 or so. This was apparently discussed on an episode of the Bethesda podcast, but the page no longer exists, so I wasn't able to listen to it directly. And what did that arena content look like prior to it being deleted? Well, some of the clues that I found actually related to an even more expansive original vision than what I thought. The secondary sources indicate that every city had arena content developed to a much more advanced state than the surviving ESM fragments alone would suggest. And there was an absolute slew of NPCs all voiced and attached to those arenas, some of which I mentioned earlier on in a slightly confused manner. Where did I get this information from? Well, it was present on both the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages and the cutting room floor. Both are useful secondary references, though the primary evidence remains the surviving data. Anyway, I just wanted to hop in to give you the actual story rather than leaving you with my half-formed theories off the back of my own digging around via the construction set. Oh, also, I should point out at this stage that for every entry in this video, I have subsequently sense-checked my primary research to ensure that I have come to the right and/or complete conclusion, and where I haven't, I will add an addendum to the section to ensure, where possible, that you aren't leaving the video with incorrect information. But, you know, my aim here is to actually conduct my own research and independently come to conclusions where possible. With that being said, if anyone notices anything I got wrong despite my sense checks, let me know in the comments below. Just don't bite my head off. I'm doing my very best here and having fun exploring the back end of this game. So, moving on, if the arena is a completely cut system, MS-17 is a more straightforward cut quest. In fact, I would say it's one of the cleanest ESM-confirmed unfinished quest shells in my investigation. The quest record exists, quest 000224CF, editor ID MS17 with a blank quest name. It has 10 journal stages. It has related NPCs, Jerolyn Duran and Ariella Duran, placed in Coral, Jerolyn Duran's house. It has dialogue topics such as Spy Rock, Jerolyn Duran topic, MS17 choice 1A and 1B, all with empty response lists. It has packages including XXX Jerolyn Duran follow player, MS17 Jerolyn Duran to house, and XXX Jerolyn Duran explore 4. It has MS17 Jerolyn script, which tracks whether Jerolyn is outside his house for dialogue purposes. The stage text gives us the quest's intended story. Jerolyn Duran of Coral believes ogres are distantly related to his family line. He asks the player to take gems and gold to Spy Rock as an offering, hoping to establish communication with the ogres. The player places the gems, returns to Jerolyn, waits a week, and later discovers that Jerolyn has gone to check Spy Rock himself. At Spy Rock, Jerolyn is missing. A note says the ogres escorted him to their home at Rock Bottom Caverns. The player goes there, finds Jerolyn trapped, frees him, escorts him out, and then either returns to Coral or raids the stores of treasure the ogres have collected. Stage 100 completes the quest with Jerolyn thanking the player and giving a reward, whereas Stage 200 completes if Jerolyn is dead. We can see there's a typo in one of the journal entries. That typo is not important as a joke, but it is useful as evidence. The package XXX Jerolyn Duran Explore 4 repeats the same misspelt Jerolyn form, linking the package cluster to the quest text. This is the sort of structural correlation that makes MS17's evidence hang together a little better. And it's fun to see a typo propagate, whatever the circumstances. Anyway, to my mind, MS17 is excellent because we can actually see the entire skeleton, and thus we can confidently confirm it as evidence of an unfinished cut quest shell. The ESM gives enough to reconstruct the basic intended quest flow. What we don't know, of course, is why it was cut. The next mystery is a little more delicate because it involves two names that are very tempting to connect, the Black Queen and the Red Queen. So how did I become aware even to look for this? I mean, it's very obscure. Well, years ago I used to religiously listen to videos by a content creator named The Cantina, as I found the videos extremely relaxing, especially for winding down in the evenings. The Cantina put out a video about cut quests, one of which included the Red Queen and Black Queen. It always stuck with me. Anyway, it's been years since I watched that video, so I thought to myself, since I'm doing this, what better time to have a dig around the ESM file and see what I can find relating to this specific topic. The ESM evidence for the Black Queen is real but quite narrow. There is a cell, Unmarked Cave 01C, with the full name Unmarked Cave Black Queen's Hall. There is also a container called Chest MS25 Dungeon Mythic Enemy Rare 01. That chest ties the cell to the missing quest ID MS25. The evidence is clear. MS25 is not present as a normal quest record in the ESM, but the dungeon remnant exists. So what we can confirm is that a Black Queen location remnant exists, and the MS25 named chest confirms that this was tied to a missing or removed quest ID. It's probable that there was once MS25 content involving this Black Queen dungeon, but what is completely unknown, however, is the full quest flow, final dialogue, exact characters, etc. Of course, unless I was missing something in my rooting around. The Red Queen is different. The Red Queen appears as one rumour under the generic rumours topic. The line says that Dervera Romulan is proud of the Newlands Lodge and especially happy that the Red Queen drinks there. The result script sets NQD Shadenhall.Dervera var to 1. The follow-up Dervera replies reset that variable, but they do not mention the Red Queen again. In my digging around, I did not find a Red Queen quest, actor, book, faction, package, item, cell script, map marker, or object in the ESM. So the Red Queen line is confirmed simply as a dangling rumour. It is not confirmed as a cut quest from the ESM alone, at least evidentially. Again, I must caveat this by saying that I'm unsure if I've missed anything in the ESM. If anyone else has managed to piece together evidence that I missed, I'd be interested to know in the comments. While I have been careful to rely solely on primary research here, I did take a look online to see if I could find anything, and while browsing various forum posts, I came across some fan discussion that described a quest sometimes called Broken Promises, involving Strantis, Halgerda, a Black Queen, Halgerda's family, a trap, and Unmarked Cave. While what we've found includes that discussion as external context, we also need to be a bit stricter here. From the Oblivion.esm file, we can confirm the Black Queen's cell and the Red Queen rumour, but we cannot prove that the Red Queen and Black Queen are the same character, or that the full reconstructed quest is recoverable from ESM records alone. There's just not enough there, at least, that I could find. That distinction actually makes my findings here stronger, not weaker, I think. It shows the discipline required when working with cut content. If we step beyond the actual evidence, we might tell a more exciting story, but it would be less trustworthy. That's not something I want to do here, because the real story is already fascinating anyway. Shaden Hall has a one-line rumour about a Red Queen at the Newlands Lodge. Elsewhere, an Unmarked Cave still contains a Black Queen Hall tied to an absent MS-25 quest. The two clues feel as though they belong to the same quest, but we just can't prove it with evidence alone. This is where I could allow myself a careful speculative moment. The Red Queen may have been a local Shaden Hall figure, perhaps Halgerda or another noble social identity, whose storyline intersected with the Black Queen dungeon. But that must remain speculation, in my opinion, and nothing more. Next, we are going to the Imperial City to take a look at a bit of cut player activity, and I must stress again, I am simply going by what I can find via the construction set, nothing else. Interestingly, this content relates to the Black Horse Courier, which is one of Oblivion's most recognisable bits of background world building. You see the office in the Imperial City Market District, you see broadsheets, you hear about the news of the Empire being carried to the people of the Empire. The Khajiit brothers Renrijra, Hasiri and Urjabi are there, and the Courier as an institution very much exists in the final game. But digging around in the construction set reveals something more specific than a newspaper service. There is a preserved employment skeleton for a player courier job. The central record is Imperial Express script, and its variables are quite clear to see. PC is courier, PC opened letter, PC delivered letter, PC late, time start, time delivered, and recipient. So what are these then? These are variables for tracking whether the player has taken a courier job, opened a letter, delivered it late, and when the job began and ended. The script even contains a recipient table. It maps numbers to inns and named NPCs across Cyrodiil. That table is really interesting because it gives the system an actual geographical element in terms of evidence. Then we find the dialogue topics. Impex work has the player facing text, "Do you need couriers?" Impex accept, "I'll take the job," has no info responses. Impex reject, "Not for that paltry sum," has no responses either. And Impex give letter, Imperial Express letter, you guessed it, has no responses, nor does Impex delivered letter. A normal player will never see a functioning delivery job here because the response layer is absent. But the backend did not disappear completely, as we can see, because it remains in the game in the form of the Black Horse Courier. Digging around further, we can find the Black Horse Courier's faction and the Courier Customers faction. We of course find the Black Horse Courier building, basement and upstairs cells. We find Renrijra, Hasiri and Urjabi placed in the office. We find 4 Courier NPCs and 4 Courier horses placed in the world. We find Impex request packages, many of them assigned to Imperial City NPCs who visit the Courier office and target Gold 001. We find Impex 01 Renrijra deliver, Impex 01 Hasiri deliver, and Impex 01 Urjabi deliver, packages assigned to the 3 brothers. We also find Impex return, assigned to all 3 brothers, targeting the Courier desk. We need to be careful about how we word all this though. The Black Horse Courier is not cut. That whole thing is present in the shipped game. What appears cut or unfinished is the player employment loop. The likely intended mechanic is easy to reconstruct because the ESM gives us the clues we need to piece it together. The player would speak to the courier, take a letter, receive a recipient assignment, travel to an inn in another city, deliver the letter, and return or receive payment. The variables suggest the job could track whether the player opened the message and whether they were late. That implies not simply a fetch quest, but a small trust-based delivery system. It's also possible that the recipient table would randomize or rotate destinations, but that's part of me theorizing with this reconstruction. The ESM confirms the variables and destinations. It does not give us the final reward logic in a working attached script, at least as far as I could see. From a player's perspective, the final game keeps the atmosphere and loses the work. You can visit the office, receive broadsheets, and see the infrastructure of an Imperial news service. But you cannot become a courier. The buried version of the system would have made what eventually became the Black Horse Courier into a functional postal network, with the player participating in the same logistics system the NPCs imply. Or it may be more accurate to say that whatever previous form it would have taken would have involved this gameplay loop. It would also have made the Inns of Cyrodiil feel more connected because the recipient table ties the office to publicans and lodges across the province. So why might it have been reduced? If I were to speculate, I'd say it might have been cut because delivery work was a bit too repetitive, too fragile with schedules and pathing, or too expensive to voice properly maybe. Or maybe it seemed a bit silly that the hero of Kvatch would be wandering about delivering mail. Another possibility is that the designers decided the Black Horse Courier worked better as a bit of background NPC living world stuff than as a full job. Whatever the case, this is one of the clearest examples of what would have been a player-facing mechanic surviving as data after the playable front end was cut from the game. One of the more interesting things I came across in my investigation was content that was not simply cut, but modified in some way. Quest IDs, rumours, markers, and scripts sometimes preserve earlier versions of quests that were later overwritten by completely different final quests. These remnants are easy to miss because the final game still has a quest with that ID or in that slot, but the leftover records point to a previous concept. MS-05 is a good example. In the final game, MS-05 is Through a Nightmare Darkly, the Bravo quest involving Hinantir and a dream world. But I located an earlier Bravo Droshanji Daedra setup. There is an info under Bravo topic where a neighbour, Droshanji, is worried because he has seen creatures. There is a placed MS-05 Daedra marker in Bravo Plaza. There is also MS-05 Droshanji Stay Home. That combination suggests an earlier MS-05 concept involving Droshanji and Daedric or creature activity in Bravo. So what is it? Well, it's a probable overwritten quest remnant. The final quest with the MS-05 slot became something else, while the old clue did not entirely disappear. A Brimmer rumour says Lyra Rosentia collects Akaviri artifacts and might have a project in mind. In the shipped game, the major Akaviri artifact quest is lifting the veil, and the key role belongs to Countess Narina Carvain, not Lyra. So the line about Lyra looks like an older quest seed or reassigned role. Then we have FGD06, which is a Fighters Guild example. The evidence points to a Blankenmarch contract rumour, Beyond Blankenmarch records, and FGD06 Dead Varanus references. The final Fighters Guild quest uses Forsaken Mind. That suggests a changed location, where a contract involving Blankenmarch or Beyond was later reworked. These changed identity remnants are not as sensational as some of the other content covered so far, but they are very valuable development archaeology. They show that quest records, topic names, and object IDs can outlive the design they were made for. A quest can change identity while old names remain embedded in scripts, markers, or rumours. And I found a great deal of satisfaction in coming across these little traces. Moving back to something a little bigger, the City Guide dialogue remnants are one of the coolest structural findings, I think. Across multiple cities, there are natural language player questions with no info responses. They seem like a local advice system. Tell me more about trainers, services, opportunities, risks, mysteries, Daedric shrines, local notables, places to sleep, sights to see, and problems needing help. As I've said, these topics have zero info responses, but again, we need to be a little cautious here. Zero response dial records are common. But the structure here is systematic. It is city by city, publican by publican, and topic by topic. It looks like Bethesda planned a more direct local guide layer where innkeepers, merchants, or knowledgeable locals could point the player to services, trainers, quests, Daedric shrines, and points of interest. In the final game, some of this information exists in rumours and generic topics, but this specific dialogue layer is hollowed out. From a player experience point of view, this would have made Oblivion's cities feel more conversational, I reckon. Which leads me neatly on to ask, why was it not in the final game? I reckon voice acting cost is a likely reason. A full city guide system would require many recorded lines across cities and NPCs. It might also have made exploration feel too directed or cheap. Another possibility is that it overlapped with the rumour system, which already gives local hints in a more organic way. Whatever the case, in the end, the ESM cannot tell us why. All it can do is show that it once existed. As an addendum, I am adding here that, given what I subsequently found out about the arena being cut due to storage space concerns, and this mainly being tied to voice lines, it is perhaps entirely possible that the same thing happened here, as another theoretical reason for this feature's removal. This set would have included a great many voice lines after all. Moving on, we're going to take a look at Hugo Billet, who is a Mythic Dawn sleeper agent. His house and basement exist in the shipped game. Rumours describe him as odd and mention strange noises from his house or basement. Some interesting things I found in the construction set though were empty player-facing dial records around Mythic Dawn postulates. These include Mythic Dawn postulates topic, Mythic Dawn postulates book with the player text "It's just a book I found", Mythic Dawn postulates campsite with "From a campsite inside Sancretor", Mythic Dawn postulates billet with "From Hugo Billet", Mythic Dawn postulates attacked with "Billet attacked me, I killed him", and Mythic Dawn postulates go on with "Interesting, go on". These have no info children from what I could see. So what does that mean? Well, this looks like a missing investigation branch. The player may have been able to bring a Mythic Dawn text or clue to someone, maybe someone from the Mythic Dawn. Explain where it came from, connect it to Yugal, or report that Yugal attacked them. The mention of a campsite inside Sancretor is especially intriguing because it points beyond Yugal's house to something a bit broader, and it is a bit puzzling given how important Sancretor is to the main quest. But again, all of this would just be speculation and putting disparate clues together. So we can confirm the empty topics exist, Yugal's shipped context exists, rumours about his strange basement exist, and we can speculate from evidence that there was a more explicit dialogue investigation path around Mythic Dawn postulates. But what we can't confirm is the exact form any quest would have taken, the speaker or speakers, or the final outcomes. Next, the Renrijra Krin Talasma material is quite interesting. Talasma is the innkeeper at Coral's Oak enclosure, and we can find evidence remaining where she was linked to the Renrijra Krin, a hardline Khajiit group looking to reclaim territory from Cyrodiil that they claim is rightfully theirs. If we look at the files, we can see that there is a Renrijra Krin faction. There are dial records Renrijra Krin Talasma, Renrijra Krin Talasma yes and no, with no info children. So there is definitely originally some planned connection there that never made it into the final game. What's interesting is that she also appears as an Imperial Express recipient in the courier script we talked about earlier. I'm not implying Renrijra branch was tied to the Imperial Express, but it is interesting though to see Talasma sitting at the intersection of a couple of interesting cut record clusters. Coral, inns, couriers, and now an empty topic connected to a Khajiit insurgent faction. The cautious conclusion here is a possible cut quest, or maybe simply that Talasma would give some information, if we are being more conservative. Because there are no quest stages in this evidence at all, no complete dialogue path, and no way to make any final reconstruction. But there is enough to mention as part of the wider theme. Oblivion contains player topic remnants that imply conversations no longer present in the final game. Moving on, I just want to acknowledge the missing city of Such, which I covered in depth in my Oblivion's Missing City video, so I am simply mentioning it here and pointing you over to that video when you've finished with this one, if you haven't seen it already. Now, our next finding I find to be really cool and quite funny actually. The Skull of Corruption is a great example of a superseded implementation. The artifact exists in the final game. The cut part we're going to be discussing is the old method the game apparently used or planned to use for creating corrupted clones. The ESM contains a full bank of DA Skull NPCs, all races, listed as male and female variants. The old spell script has commented out race and sex detection. The old staff script has a long commented out mapping from race var to sex var, to static clone references such as DA Skull Argonian male ref, or DA Skull Wood Elf female ref. The final implementation uses create full actor copy. It sets the target, creates a live copy, names it corrupted clone, moves it to the player, and later deletes the full actor copy. That's a better implementation, I think, because it copies the actual target rather than summoning a generic race sex template. So we can confirm from the game files that the old clone bank records exist, the commented mapping exists, and the final dynamic copy method is used. It's more than likely that the template bank was an earlier implementation strategy replaced during development. That is Development Archaeology 101, a design solution superseded by a more flexible engine function with the old data left behind for us to trace the development process somewhat. Super interestingly, the ESM also contains remnants of demo material, especially around E3 and Kvatch. It's not cut content as such, but it's really cool stuff to find in the files. We can find E3 Kvatch, E3 Trig Zone Kvatch Attack 1, Attack 2, Bricks 1, E3 Gate Duplicate 000, E3 Demo Packages, Creatures, Soldiers, Dremora and Daedroth, and E3 quest records. This is obviously remnants of a public demonstration, press build remnants from the now defunct Gaming Expo E3, particularly around scripted Kvatch attack effects. This kind of material is valuable mainly because it allows us to actually get a look at what Bethesda were wanting to show off before the game released. It's a bit more evidence of the development pipeline with a bit of a window into the marketing pipeline as well. Definitely worth noting as something interesting that still exists in the ESM file. There are also records that we can find that might look like something more than they actually are if we simply applied category names. This is where the ESM becomes especially easy to misread because a quest record feels like it ought to be a quest. In practice though, a quest record can be a dialogue controller, a test harness, a support state, a debug tool, a demo script, a voice budget export structure, or a real unfinished adventure. Test Todd Quest is a great example of exactly this. Its full name is Todd's Test Adventure. Its stage text includes the player needing to walk around and test everything, and a completion stage for Todd's testing. The cluster includes Todd Test, Todd Land, Todd Test Land 2, Todd Test Forest, Todd Test Forest Tavern, Test Todd Folio 01, Test Todd Letter, and Test Todd Scroll. Obviously it isn't some mysterious lost quest, but rather simply a developer test environment with a joke-like, author-labelled vibe to it. Test QA is even clearer when you check it out. The quest's full name is This is for QA testing. Test voice budget has the full description, export this quest to see race, sex for each city. It's an unusually direct glimpse of production workflow. Beyond test quests, a large part of the ESM in terms of world spaces where the actual testing would take place is not meant for normal players at all. Oblivion has a testing hall, warehouse cells, author-named test cells, path grid testing spaces, combat AI warehouses, book warehouses, creature testing halls, lighting warehouses, armour and weapon warehouses, crime and trespass test cells, and many test world spaces. These spaces are working environments where a developer can use a warehouse cell to inspect clutter, test collision, validate AI, check path grids, test combat behaviour, or verify books and items. The test cell network is visually fun and often quite strange, but I want to be careful to present this as behind the scenes infrastructure that's simply interesting to find in the data. It gives us some cool info too. It tells us what Bethesda were testing when they were building the game, warehouses for every object class, test cells for combat and AI, sample interiors, demo spaces, and author-specific sandboxes. It's the ESM equivalent of a workshop floor, and it's really cool to tread the same ground as the developers. The book and item data I trawled through was, I think, one of the most charming parts of my investigation because it shows both practical and humanising QA leftovers, alongside some other bits and pieces with a bit more of an in-world point of interest going on. Test QA Scroll 1 we looked at earlier has the absurd full name W, lots of W's, and demonstrates formatting tags such as BR, P and HR along with alignment tests. Test fonts stress tests alphabets, accents and symbols. Test Daedric and Test Handwriting use Grey Fox invitation style text as font and handwriting samples. Test Joel Book repeats font test alphabets. Test Todd Letter says simply that it should be a short letter, signed Love Todd. Test Todd Scroll uses a long scroll text. Test Elder Scroll appears as a placeholder or QA test object with no description text that I could see. Then there are the handbills. These are far more interesting as unused world building. I found many unplaced local paper adverts for Bravo, Coral and Skingrad businesses and chapels. They advertise Bayrone Stables, the Lonely Suitor Lodge, Silver Home on the Water, the Fair Deal, A Warlock's Luck, the Archer's Paradox, the Grey Mare, the Oaken Crozier, Northern Goods and Trade, Renrijra's Books, Grateful Pass Stables, Two Sisters Lodge, Westfield Inn, Colovian Traders, Hammer and Tongs, and Chapels of Mara, Arche Stendar, and Julianos. The placement data in my investigation found 0 placements and only test QA books incoming for these handbills. This suggests an unused paper clutter experiential layer, local adverts that would have made shops, inns and chapels feel a wee bit more alive. They are small bits of detail to be sure, but they are exactly the kind of thing that gives a city a bit more immersion. I'm not entirely sure why these remained unplaced. It's a shame that they weren't used. And it's not simply quests, careers, dialogue that didn't make the cut. There are spells that were cut as well. The explicit unused deleted spell records include BS Tower Beggar's Nose Unused, which interestingly is a spell in Morrowind. Shadow Mooncalf Unused, also a spell in Morrowind. Lady's Grace Unused, yep, you guessed it, from Morrowind. And Ritual Blessed Touch Unused, from Morrowind, along with a couple of deleted lockpicking spells. The names suggest perhaps older versions of spells that may have been renamed, perhaps. There is one more vanished system that didn't actually show up in the ESM but was present in the construction set. If you check gameplay settings, you can find traces of what looks like potential holiday celebration days that never seem to be used in the shipped game. I've mentioned already that these didn't show up in the ESM, but I want to explain a bit more about that. What's interesting is that while I didn't find a complete holiday quest system sitting there waiting to be reactivated, I did find some other interesting tidbits that, well, very tenuously may be related. Trawling through the data, I found quite a lot of references to the names of the holidays in Oblivion's book text, which of course I could have found in the game, but because I was using the construction set, well. Anyway, I did think to myself, well, maybe this gives a bit of context to all those mentions. I know holidays were present in previous games, but still, there's quite a lot of mentions here which made me recontextualise what was in the books. I guess I was thinking, were they pointedly mentioned in the books because they were on the mind of the people writing them, because it was a mechanic originally meant to be in the game? Pure speculation, but still. Our first mention, the book 2920 Sun's Height, mentions the Merchants' Festival. Why, if she left now, she could be in Hammerfell by the Merchants' Festival. The book The Wolf Queen Volume 3 mentions North Wind's Prayer. The Emperor Pelagius Septim II died during the Festival of North Wind's Prayer. The book 2920 Morning Star mentions South Wind's Prayer. The chimes proclaiming South Wind's Prayer echoed through the wide boulevards and gardens of the Imperial City. And Pala Volume 1 mentions Tales and Talos. It was at a Tales and Talos ball. So it's not really evidence of anything as such, but an interesting little final diversion of a piece of cut content that oddly enough isn't explicitly even present in the ESM, but exists in the construction set, and had mentions of the same holidays that I could find in books. Another addendum from the future, again as part of my sense check, and I wanted to ensure I hadn't missed anything. Anyway, it turns out there are actually surviving voice lines in the game files relating to these holidays that I didn't manage to find independently. You can actually go and listen to these yourself over at the cutting room floor. Really cool stuff. I should point out that it's crazy so many of these voice lines survived, especially given the fact that the arena content was cut to save space, mainly due to voice lines. So, I hope you enjoyed my investigation. It was fun to finally bite the bullet, as it were, and crack open the game using the construction set and see these things for myself, as well as coming across things I didn't know about, and get more of an idea of how the things I did know about actually worked. Suffice it to say, I will be doing follow-up videos in this exact style for the Fallouts, as well as Skyrim, and maybe Morrowind, and obviously all the DLCs as well. With that said, thanks for sticking around with me to the end. Take care, and see you next time.